Compass Mining is your trusted partner in Bitcoin mining. Whether you're investing in one machine or thousands, our customizable solutions are tailored to meet your needs. We are your experts in Bitcoin mining, offering a platform where individuals and businesses can purchase hardware, host machines, and access a range of ancillary Bitcoin mining services. We also specialize in large-scale site development and data center operations. Discover more at compassmining.io and see how we can power your success today. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. In today's episode, Anthony Power and I will attempt to answer the question, will history repeat? There's so much volatility right now in the Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining sector, and it really has people split into two camps. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Before we get into it, smash the like button, you guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below which of these two camps you're currently sitting in. Do you think the cycle peak is behind us or still yet to come? With that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay, guys, that's right. Wednesday afternoon, middle of the trading week here, Anthony. We've seen some ups, we've seen some downs, and it's really starting to beg the question, where are we at in the Bitcoin cycle, and will history repeat itself here? It seems we've got two camps based on the people and comments we're talking and reading, really thinking either the Bitcoin peak and cycle peak is behind us, and we're now heading for maybe a bear cycle, or more optimistic side of things saying, you know what, we're just in that kind of elbow dip we've seen in previous cycles, and we're moving onward and upward from here. So with that being said, that's the topic we're going to be discussing today. I've brought along a Bitcoin chart here to kick things off. We're now down in the $81,000 range at the time this screenshot was taken. But we like to talk about volatility on the channel, Anthony, and this week is not immune to that.
Yeah, it's been a challenging, I'm going to say challenging week, but probably a challenging few months. And we mentioned yesterday on the podcast, we won't bear too much time on it today, but yeah, those people who've got miners in the space now will have seen their portfolios probably decline by about 50% since beginning of the year. And just when you think there's a bit of respite with the Bitcoin price, just look at the last week, it dropped down to 76,000, made a bit of recovery yesterday, but it's down again today. So this is Bitcoin doing Bitcoin things. But you have to sort of, hold the line on this one. That history will tell us, if we believe in the previous cycles, that this year is a bull cycle year and potential is to go much higher from where we are today.
It certainly is. Now, I went back into the vaults here. This was a tweet from Michael Saylor last year, 2024, talking about Bitcoin volatility being a feature rather than a bug. And you can see the performance of MSTR and Bitcoin compared to the S&P 500. We've got some additional visuals to show this historical comparison, Anthony, but you're exactly right. Volatility is inherent to Bitcoin and, of course, the Bitcoin miners as a proxy. And it's interesting how people, despite knowing this going into the sector, continue to struggle with the ups and downs day to day.
Yeah, I can go back to 2021, that first couple of months of 2021, Bitcoin price exploded, and also the mining stocks really exploded. We saw some massive increases in the share price in that early period of 2021. Then we had the news about Tesla buying Bitcoin. That was a great positive news story there, and the Bitcoin price rallied all the way up to close to 60,000. And then really peaked towards the end of the year at 69,000. So we saw that great run through 2021, and you can see from the chart there, where it occurred. And then we're sort of like in that early period now of 2025, 4 years later on, and Bitcoin's just come off its highs, 25-30% from its highs in December. But expectation from previous cycles is that, the Bitcoin price will pick up. And bear in mind, we talked yesterday probably at length about all the macroeconomics, so we don't need to cover that again today. But as I say, we'll just reflect on the fact that Bitcoin's doing Bitcoin things as it normally does. I'm not selling any Bitcoin at the moment. I'm adding some to the miners as and when I get money into my pension account, which is a tax-free shelter. and hopefully, that'll give me some funds to buy some miners at these really low prices that they are at the moment.
Most definitely. I'm trying to follow suit as well, Anthony. And as you say, you're not selling, I'm not selling. Looks like Elon Musk and Tesla aren't selling. The US government now isn't selling. So there's a few of us in that camp, as we'll come on to in a second here. Now, I just mentioned a couple additional visuals talking about asset class performance historically. So the first one here looks at performance over the last 1, 3, 5, and 10-year timeframes. Now, this was taken as of 2024. This is a full end of year look. However, you can see in any one of those time frame categories, Anthony, Bitcoin is head and shoulders above any of the other contestants here. So once again, making the point, volatility is a feature here. You're not going to get these type of percentage returns without similar percentage declines, unfortunately, at some points in the cycle.
Yeah, I mean, look at some of those, the 5 and 10 year returns there for Bitcoin. Nothing can compete with that. And actually, as we go forward, you won't see these style of returns again, over the next 5 years, because of the fact is now we've got more adoption now in Bitcoin than we had previously. And the fact that, we have a number of, not just companies, but states and countries vying to hold more Bitcoin. This never happened prior to 2024 until the ETFs were approved. So we're in a different dimension now. So these are here, but the same will still go. Bitcoin, will effectively probably outperform all these asset classes until we've had that further adoption. And I've always used that analogy. We're probably still at the iPhone 3 or 5 stage. We've still got a long way to go. iPhone's got a 6D model out now, so we're still playing catch up in that adoption there. Think about, technology in the past and how many years it took before real adoption kicked in. And Bitcoin's, been around for 15 years and is going to be around a lot longer. So, as each year passes, more and more adoption, and therefore you'll see probably more sort of like a stably off of the actual returns. Then it'll still be good returns, but you won't see these likes of 26,000% over 10 years, or 1,200% over the last 5 years. I think those days, because of the lack of adoption, the real volatility in those periods there, where price could change dramatically day to day. We're seeing volatility at the moment, but we're only seeing probably 2 or 3% of the Bitcoin price. Going back to those days there, you could probably see 50 or 60% changes on a daily basis.
That's what I was going to say. If people are concerned about the volatility in this cycle, I can't imagine the comments we would have been getting back in 2017, 2021, some of those occurrences, Anthony. But you're exactly right. As adoption increases, there's more volume, there's more liquidity in the global Bitcoin market. That does tend to flatten out volatility and, in our opinion, tend to extend the cycle length. That's another big debate right now. Is this a shortened cycle where we've already seen the peak, or potentially an elongated cycle where we may still have a peak yet to come? In my opinion, Anthony, as you say, the more people, the more liquidity, the more volume in a market tends to move the market more calmly and at a slower pace compared to some of those highly volatile early years. So an interesting perspective there. Now, the next chart, very similar to the last. However, this looks individual year performance and to a wider assortment, I guess, of investment classes. So you can see a couple of patterns here, Anthony. Number one, Bitcoin definitely takes the podium position there for number one. Overall, I think 9 out of 12 years, but also for the pattern you can see here, very difficult, as you and I were saying, to identify a second place asset class.
Absolutely. And interesting from that chart there, if Bitcoin wasn't a top performer, it was actually the worst performer in that year. And if you look at those years where it was worst performer, it was 2014, 2018, 2022. Now, for those people that have been in the space just the last few years, 2022 was sort of like the peak of the bear cycle. We saw the Bitcoin price, drop from where it was at the end of 2021. I mean, it had peaked in 2021 back in November. I think it was like 69,000, drops all the way down to just over 15,000 by the following December. Hence, that Bitcoin percentage dropped there of 64%. But 2023, 2024 saw that Bitcoin price rise consistently. So again, in 2023, 157%, and in 2024, certainly over 100% as well, because the Bitcoin price started the beginning of last year at 42,000 and ended the year more than double that amount in December as it achieved its all-time high of over $109,000. So yeah, you're quite right. I can't see which is second, but clearly the top performing asset over that period has been Bitcoin. And it just goes to show how the cycles are really relevant. So if you look at 2021, which was the last bull cycle, 60% increase there. 2017, 1,375%. 2013, I would have liked to have had some Bitcoin in 2013, 5,428% in 1 year. That's a 50x in 1 year. And now we're in 2025, which is again, now it's the fourth cycle. So there's optimism for this year. And we'll come on to talk a little bit more about why we feel a bit more optimistic later in the podcast.
Yeah, great point, Anthony. And that's exactly the essence of the thumbnail. Will history repeat? It's impossible to answer that question, obviously, but looking historically, there's a pretty good percentage chance that we may have a little juice left in the system here. So with that being said, Anthony, and as you're talking about adoption, if you didn't catch our video yesterday with Curtis Harris from Compass Mining, he's actually so convinced on Bitcoin. They're currently working to sell their house, move into a rental so he can dollar cost average that into Bitcoin. So another great practical real world example of individuals who have really taken this Bitcoin maxi approach to the next step. So a great interview there. The next chart I wanted to bring up, Anthony, is the Bitcoin miners. Now, they've moved a little bit actually to the green or favorable side since I took this screenshot. The point being here, though, you guys, Bitcoin miners are a proxy, a leveraged proxy to Bitcoin. We've talked about this 2 to 3x proxy. Now, many of these companies have diversified revenue now. Obviously, the Seal miner, equipment, ASIC production. We've got HPC, AI, hosting, all types of things. However, at their core, these are a proxy on Bitcoin. And you can see clearly they move at a greater degree, greater volatility compared to the underlying asset class. Now, that brings up an interesting graph here, Anthony, talking about Amara's law and this hype cycle in technology. So you and I had a good discussion about this just a few minutes ago, but as these companies move into these future technologies like HPC, AI, even electric vehicles are listed as an example, it's very important to start to think where we're actually at on this Amara's curve or Amara's law chart.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can argue where we think the miners are and where we think the miners that are operating, HPC business models as well. And HPC AI has been out a lot longer than people led to believe. I mean, most people would have sort of heard of the likes of ChatGPT maybe over the last couple of years, but it's been around a lot longer than that. And actually, it's part of our daily life at the moment. I mean, I switch on my phone or my iPad, and which is an Apple model, and you've got this Apple Intelligence, and other models have their own types of AI built into the system now. Many applications already have an automated AI feature. If you type in emails or you're on LinkedIn doing a post, there's features there that will help you type the post itself. So most people are using it on a day-to-day basis without even realizing it. So it is quite, I think we agreed that maybe the HPC AI is probably on the slope of enlightenment, and the fact it's been around for quite a long time, more years than people probably realize.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Initially, when I saw this chart, I thought maybe AI HPC would be in that innovation trigger point, meaning we're potentially at this peak of inflated expectations. However, as you'll see, AI has been talked about since 1960s, Anthony. So there's an argument to be said. No, we've already gone through the trough of disillusionment, as they call it, and are on that upward slope again. Similar on the Bitcoin mining side of things, it really depends when you start thinking about that genesis moment. Was it when Bitcoin was created? Was it the 2017 cycle? Was it last cycle? Was it the point where the ETFs were adopted? Again, all about perspective and time preference or time frame as you're looking at some of these longer historical cycles. So very interesting, and exactly what we referred to in the thumbnail.
Yeah, and I can really confirm, that the AI being around for a long time. I got married quite a few years ago. I'm a bit older than you, Bryce. And just after I got married, my wife basically said that, she knew everything. So I ended up throwing away all the encyclopedias in the house that we had, because I had my own AI tool actually sat there next to me on the sofa, answering all my questions and telling me how my life was going to run for the next 50 years.
There you go. Well, you've been on the adoption curve for quite some time. I guess you're on the slope of enlightenment now, Anthony.
And she
With
also says
that
this, I
being
will be on the slope of enlightenment.
with that being said, we've talked about the adoption as it impacts these cycles, this 4-year Bitcoin cycle. The other thing we've seen very unique and interesting this time around, Anthony, is the corporate adoption. So we've brought this chart from HODL 15. You can see the top 70 companies that now hold Bitcoin on balance sheet. The thing that stood out to me, Anthony, the only arrow you see on this visual is a green up arrow, indicating none of these companies are selling. All of them are highly convicted on Bitcoin and actually increasing that conviction despite the downturn.
Absolutely. And you can see quite a number of those green arrows are actually mining companies. And we've seen a whole change around now in the last sort of 15, 18 months where, more and more miners now are actually hodling their Bitcoin. We went through that bear cycle in 22, 23, where we saw miners trying to hodl through the bear cycle and, not realizing that as the Bitcoin price dropped, their collateral against their loans were based on mining machines that were also dropping equally as quick as the Bitcoin price. However, since the end of that bear cycle, and we've seen the start of 2024, we start to see some real movement in Bitcoin price. A lot of these mining companies started to then, hodl or restart to hodl and build up their treasury positions. Some notable additions to this, you've got to look at the likes of Bitdeer, who over the last literal 4 or 5 months have created now a hodl of just over 1,000 Bitcoin, 1,066 as at the date of the 10th when this was released here. So that's put them in sort of like, the top half there. We've also seen a couple of miners, for growth. So Hive and Cypher are growing big this year in terms of, some of their sites coming online. They've been using a bit of Bitcoin for that there. But all in all, you're quite right. It's just green arrows. I'm not seeing any red arrows on here. Yes, I would imagine some of the ETFs are actually selling because we're seeing, as we said yesterday on the podcast, we're seeing that movement into maybe some safer areas for investors. And if they're doing that, they may be selling some of their ETF stocks, and therefore the ETF physically has to sell the Bitcoin because that's what it's predicated on. The Bitcoin value, no other asset class could be worth holding that type of investment to keep up with Bitcoin price. My other notable point there is how long Michael Saylor is going to wait before he wants to see a 5 in front of that number at the top there. What's your thoughts, Bryce?
Yeah, I said not long. I'm surprised this came out on the 10th. He's probably already got it in there at some point. I think he has 17,000 Bitcoin personally. And I think he said he's going to throw away the keys to that Bitcoin as a donation to the overall Bitcoin ecosystem when he passes. So an interesting fact there. Now, the other point I wanted to make, Anthony, you look across this list of 70 companies, publicly traded companies. I think last time I counted, we're in the 23, 24 range in terms of the number of companies we've had on the channel covered, CEO interviews. Obviously, the miners is our bread and butter, but even if you look down the list to some of the smaller Canadian companies, Control Technologies, for example, this is a building HVAC system automation company. They came and reached out to us to help actually acquire these Bitcoin and put them on balance sheet. So it's just so interesting to see the worlds colliding here and everything really boiling down to this Bitcoin standard. So in addition to the corporations, in addition to the global adoption, we've got industry veterans like Mike Alfred also saying, hey, you know what? Sentiment is low right now, but I think we're still just partway through this cycle. We've got Cynthia Loomis coming out saying this is going to be the year for Bitcoin and digital assets. And on top of that, obviously Trump's administration, but 21 countries around the world that are at some point in this Bitcoin adoption journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are all the positive news stories over the last year that we've been talking about through all the podcasts. I've yet to see anything, other than the sort of like, the macroeconomic news, which has impacted Bitcoin. There's no two ways about it. You've got a couple of wars going on around the world at the moment. You've got some inflation issues, across many of the top economies in the world. You've also got some of these countries have severe amounts of debt as well that they're trying to repay. Because if they don't repay the debt, then the actual, the interest and loans become, even the debt becomes even bigger because they can't meet the payments. And so, these are sort of like, the macroeconomic issues that are affecting maybe the Bitcoin price at the moment. But we know that the likes of the US are using, all the sort of tools available to them. They've got, Elon Musk now heading up the Doge. And they've made some great strides, even in this early few months. So if we see that pick up, then I think the rest of the year we could see the Bitcoin price also rally, because it means that people then feel a bit more assured about where they are, where they are financially, and when they have the ability to go back into the investment market. Bitcoin certainly will be one of those assets there. I mean, 21 countries considering Bitcoin a strategic reserve. That wasn't even spoken about a year ago. Now it's 21 countries. We've got something up to like 20 states in the US are also, going through the process at the moment, and a couple of those states are very, very close to actually achieving strategic reserve. We've had a few states that have literally said, not at the moment. We'll come back in a year or 2 years' time to reconsider it. But as we see that domino effect occur, once, the likes of maybe Utah or Texas, who are leading the pack in terms of where they are on the process, I think you'll see a lot more states fall in line behind those, because you'd want to rather be in it than out of it. And, I've been in the space sort of 5 years now, and I've seen, more and more people, more and more these positive news stories coming to the fore, in this, especially in this last 12 months.
Compass Mining makes Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone. Start mining in as little as 48 hours with our turnkey hardware, online and mining directly to your Bitcoin wallet within 2 business days. Find out more at compassmining.io and get started now. Most definitely. And that's that global game theory we talk about. It starts as a small pocket, a niche group of individuals. The idea grows and grows, and eventually it's a small group that's excluded from that idea. So very interesting discussion. The final point, just a technical analysis slide here from Largo, talking about the last time Bitcoin bounced off that 200-day moving average. We discussed this yesterday in the podcast as well, Anthony, and you can see the last time the RSI, or relative strength index, was this week, and we were in this 200 moving day average range. That was just before the October-November rally we saw in 2024. Again, your guess is as good as mine if this will repeat or not. However, Largo is calling for a repeat in the $150,000 range, which ironically or coincidentally lines up exactly with Freedom by 40's $150,000 range. So again, Anthony, there's 2 camps here. Either we could be through the peak of this cycle, we're down the slope down, in which case the likes of Elon Musk, Tesla, the United States government, Trump, these 21 countries, these 70 corporations, and all the individual investors like you, me, and the rest of the mining mafia are all incorrect. Or we've still got some juice left in the tank. We're going through that mid-bull run pullback, and they're onward and upward from here, really supporting this adoption we've been seeing. So at the end of the day, you answer that question for yourself, but you and I, Anthony, I think are firmly in the camp of we've still got some highs left to reach here.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, we're going through a difficult patch at the moment, but we've been through difficult patches before, and we've come through, and 2023, 2024 was proof of that. When Bitcoin price got down to 15,000, many people thought that was the end. And, just over a year later, we're hitting sort of, 6 digits. So, I'm holding firm at the moment, and not selling any Bitcoin whatsoever.
Yeah, it's a great point, Anthony. And to really put an exclamation mark on this point, even on a macro level here, it feels and sounds like in the news that the end of the world is around the corner. The markets are crashing. We're going into trade wars. But if you zoom out again, only 6 months, the S&P is essentially flat over the last 2 quarters.
Yeah, absolutely. And, our good friend, Anthony Pompliano has basically said, don't bother reading the mainstream news today. If you do, you'll think the world's ending and the market's crashing. But you're quite right. This S&P over the last 6 months is fairly flat there. Yes, we've had a bit of a rise, but we're just back to where we were 6 months ago. And actually, if you think about the Bitcoin price is probably higher than it was 6 months ago. It certainly wasn't 80,000 before the election, so we're still not in a doom scenario. I'm holding firm. I think there's plenty more upside to come.
Perfect. So with that being said, you guys, that's our position. That's our stance. Hopefully that gives you some confidence on your investment and your outlook on Bitcoin. As we know, we're going through a very difficult and emotional time in the investment journey here. So the miners themselves continuing to push on day after day. They're not worried about the price of Bitcoin or the share price. They're worried about building their businesses and expanding their operations. Speaking of which, we just got the operational update for Bitdeer Technologies Group for the month of February, and so much to be excited about at this company.
Yeah, Bitdeer released their details today. Bit later than normal, but I managed to just get them in the article before it was sent to Compass Mining. In February, they produced 110 Bitcoin. That average was a little bit down on what it was in January by about 3.3%. One thing we've already mentioned is the fact that they've grown this hodl over a very, very short period of time. They actually purchased a bit of Bitcoin as well. Now they've got as at the end of February, they had 1,039 Bitcoin, and that had a valuation of about $88 million at the time. In terms of what they're doing regarding the seal miner, you mentioned the seal miner earlier. They're finalizing this mass production of the seal miner, and they've already sort of produced a 3.7 exahash. And these should be expected to be shipped to the facilities by the end of March. So in this next couple of weeks, we'll see a lot more mine machines arrive, start to get plugged in maybe in early April. So by the end of April, we start seeing this hash rate increase. Now, they've also, at the same time as the Seal Miner A1, they're producing the Seal Miner A2. That's progressing well. And they've got 35 exahash, hopefully to be completed by October 2025. And that includes, 7 exahash for external sales. So the majority of that 35 is going to be used at their facilities. They're going to have a big growth strategy and hash rate all the way through 2025. So at the end of the year, they'll be sort of in that group with the likes of CleanSpark and IREN and Riot and Marathon Digital, with a significant hash rate, well over 30 exahash, probably heading towards 40 exahash. Now, with the Bitcoin price dropping, some of the customers who've been putting orders in have requested a few deferred payments to make way for this, and to mitigate this inventory that's been produced and not been issued yet. The company plans to redirect some of these units to self-mining, but still remains confident that they'll sell the full allocation. In terms of their infrastructure, we know that Bitdeer have probably one of the largest pipelines of energy in the whole mining sector, getting on for 2.7 gigawatts of power in total. So the expansion is progressing across multiple locations. The 40 megawatts expansion in Norway is in the final approval phase, while the 100 megawatt hydro cooling conversion in Rockdale, Texas is set to begin phased energization in March 2025. Construction at the 500 megawatt site in Bhutan remains on schedule. And in addition, while we're talking about the seal miners themselves, Bitdeer have also completed successful testing on the latest Bitcoin mining chip, the Seal Miner A3, following the tape out. Now, when they did this testing, it demonstrated exceptional power efficiency ratio of 9.7 joules a terahash. Now, bear in mind, if you look at Bitmain's most efficient miner at the moment, which I think is the Hydro miner, at 13.5 joules a terahash. And Bitdeer had an estimation of probably about 10 to 11 for the Seal Miner A3. They've gone below 10 at 9.7 joules a terahash, using low voltage, ultra power saving mode. And it achieved a target performance as outlined in their latest presentation. So that's very positive. Now, they are on track as well to develop the Seal Miner A4, which is going to be a mind-blowing 5 joules a terahash. So just to put that into context, if you're comparing the SealMiner A4 with the average machine that IREN have got in their facility, we know that IREN can produce Bitcoin cheaper than every miner at the moment because they've got the most efficient fleet and they've also got access to some of the cheapest energy in the space. They've got 15 joules a terahash for their average machine efficiency. By going down to 5, the seal miner, that means it will be able to produce Bitcoin at a third of the price of the most efficient mining machine that IREN has. So that just puts that into a little bit of context. So when we talk about halvings and the fact that your revenues are cut in half, we're talking about companies now producing machines that can take away a third or two-thirds of the cost of mining a Bitcoin. And at the moment, with the announcements that are coming out, Bitdeer apparently seems to be leading that space. Now, it's no real shock because Bitdeer were part of the Bitmain family before they moved away about 3 or 4 years ago. So, they've got a significant amount of R&D personnel doing all this work. It's actually quite expensive. I think they had to pay well over 50 million recently for the actual wafers from TSMC to do this work. But it looks like it's going to be game changing, and this will put everyone on their toes in the same way that sort of DeepSeek affected the US when they announced what they were doing. I'm sure that what Bitdeer are doing now is sending ripples through the market to some of the big miners like Bitmain, like MicroBT, like Canaan, to get their technology up to the same sort of levels, which then only benefits the whole of the industry because for it to be successful, miners must be able to maintain a margin to mine. At the moment, looking through the last set of quarterly earnings, not many miners were actually producing Bitcoin in a viable way. We looked at IREN. IREN probably one of the few companies, if you include all the costs that they have, including the likes of depreciation, which is the cost of buying the miners in the first place and helping towards build those facilities, and all the sort of like the stock compensation, which is effectively another line of payroll for these companies. Although it's not a cash cost, they are real costs, and they still were able to mine Bitcoin profitably, accounting for some of these costs as well, whereas other miners would have no chance. So by getting these efficiency numbers really low, down to 5, this is going to be great for Bitcoin miners moving forward.
Yeah, a couple comments on that one, Anthony. As you and I talked about, obviously the R&D component, they have proven they can execute on this technology roadmap. The big question mark now in the investment community is whether or not they can produce at scale. But the nice thing for Bitdeer, as you just alluded to, with the power portfolio that they have and the ability to self-mine, they're really in a great situation here. Whether these orders continue to grow, whether they are pushed back, Bitdeer can take advantage of any scenario to really deploy this technology and these industry-leading efficiencies you talk about. The other thing there, talking about a third of IREN's fleet. So if IREN's getting a power cost, say $21,000, $31,000 a Bitcoin, that in theory could drop that, assuming all things equal, to the $7,000, $10,000 per Bitcoin range, which is just mind-blowing when you start to think Bitcoin in the 90, 100, $150,000 potential range here. So if nothing else, Anthony, like you say, at least this innovation is going to push companies like Bitmain, who control 80, 90% of the market. They need a competitor that's pushing them to innovate and be creative. So at the very least, I think Bitdeer and the Seal Miner will be capable of that. So a few comments on that one. Next up, Gryphon, another company we cover on the channel, a smaller miner. They put out a couple of releases today. The first one essentially talking about their dispute with Sphere 3D and clearing that air.
Yeah, put out a couple of updates, and this dispute with Sphere 3D has been going on for quite a long time. Well, at the end of the day now, this has now been effectively resolved with no payments made to either company, and effectively provides for a full release of Gryphon from any known or unknown or unsuspected claims. So this is one they can put out of the way now and focus now on delivering some of the targets that they've been talking about over the last 6 months. The second update today was an SEC update, Form 8K that Gryphon have provided to effectively say that the Nasdaq has given them notice on potentially not meeting some of the criteria to remain on the Nasdaq. So there's a compliance of $1 minimum bid price for country listing on there, and Gryphon's has fallen below that for a period of 30 days. I think Gryphon are going to appeal about this, so they're going to have a date set there because they'll obviously feel there's some mitigating circumstances, and they feel that they have a strategy in place that will get to them. But this isn't just about, this isn't a thing about Gryphon today. If you think about what we said earlier about Bitcoin price and mining stock prices, how they've dropped significantly, there's quite a few miners out there that will probably be on the verge of getting some of these types of letters or having to work out scenarios how they're going to avoid these letters. And we've seen in the past, even some of the bigger miners, likes of Hut 8, likes of Hive Digital, who've done a reverse split to avoid these types of letters. So that's where you consolidate, maybe 5 shares to one. And that way, if you have a share price, say at 80 cents, which is not meeting the minimum requirements of $1, by consolidating 5 shares, that will bring that share price to $4. So therefore, you're above the $1 minimum line. Obviously, from shareholders, they obviously have, a lot less shares than they originally have. So if you're a shareholder with 100 shares, you then, on that consolidation, have 20 shares, but obviously at a slightly higher price. So I think a few of these companies will be thinking about strategies to avoid these types of letters. Gryphon have announced today because legally they're required to, and we'll watch this one closely as further announcements come out.
Yeah, we sure will. And these are fairly common, just speaking even from the McNallie money side of things in industries where there's a lot of small micro cap companies. Unfortunately, yeah, when there's volatility in the market or you get some of these macro headwinds, it tends to hit these type of companies fairly hard. So with that being said, Anthony, a couple updates from the miners themselves. We wanted to finish off with Miner Madness. Again, really highlighting the point around volatility with hundreds of positions being moved just on the analyst board in a few weeks.
Yeah, how things can change. So 26th of February, we had the likes of Agrippa Investments, Sam, who effectively picked the same stocks, different Bitcoin price, so we can separate them, if they were to finish top of the competition. And when you look at the stocks they've chosen, I mean, it was no shock they chose an IREN. They're both big IREN fans and support that company, really well in the social media space. Cypher as well, another company that potentially is going to have some big HPC contracts. In fact, Tyler's gone as far as saying they will have a host client by the end of the year. And CleanSpark, the largest pure play miner out there at the moment, so three great picks. Now that was on the 26th of February. Just notice going down to the bottom of that table, the likes of you and me there. I'm in 193rd place. So this is 2 weeks ago, 193rd place. I've picked CleanSpark, Marathon, and Kango on the grounds that, and I explained this when I picked them, I felt for the short-term period, there was probably, some optimism in their share prices doing really well. Now, nobody's in profit this time of the competition, unfortunately. But if we fast forward just 2 weeks, I'm now currently leading the analyst board and 7th overall in the competition. I was actually first a couple of days ago, so I've dropped off a little bit. But if you go down now and look at the bottom of the analyst leaderboard, that's how things can change in 2 weeks. So from 10th to 246th, again with 3 stocks that, most people, if they were picking their 3 stocks to keep for a long, long time, IREN, Cypher, and CleanSpark would probably be well high in those 3 stocks. In fact, IREN and CleanSpark are the most popular stocks in the retail investment community at the moment by a long, long way. When we looked at choices for the competition, those 2 companies in both the first competition and the second competition were the top 2 choices across the board there. So, it just goes to show how things can change in a very, short space. And we've got just over 2 weeks left. So keep an eye on where I am now and see where I finish at the end of March. But hopefully I can stay in that top half of the competition and have a strong finish. But, things can happen very quickly in this competition.
Yeah, they sure can. Almost a complete reversal or flip of the analyst leaderboard. So, interesting competition. Check it out on powermininganalysis.com. The other thing we wanted to say, Anthony, we've actually updated all of the individual miner tabs as well. So, for any of the companies, I think the top 16 in the sector, you can go in and see all of their current metrics, facility pictures, earnings dates, all of our interviews, articles, all in one spot. So definitely helps do your due diligence or research, especially when there's so much information coming out at one time in this sector. So let us know in the comments section below, you guys, which of these camps are you in? Do you think the cycle peak is behind us and we're on the way down? Or do you think we're partway through the bull cycle and on the way up? Let us know. We'd be curious to know your thoughts. Feel free to subscribe, hit the like button. We'll see you back here tomorrow.